Hello, guys.
Miss Ola. I know that voice anywhere. Hold on, let me come back and see your face.
Hi, everybody.
There she is. Hi, Miss Ola.
Hey, Leah.
How are you?
See, there's Leah. There's Samantha. Love you guys.
We love you too. It's good to see you. Hi, Jennifer, Mr. Martin, Miss Fuller.
Hi.
Good to see all the new faces. If you'll give us about 60 seconds, we'll get started as soon as we let these last couple of people in. All right, are we ready, Samantha? Are we recording? All right, awesome. Good evening, everyone. My name is Leah LaRue, and I'm the Assistant Director of Neighborhood Planning for the City of Atlanta's Department of City. That's my side eye. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Leah LaRue, and I'm the Assistant Director of Neighborhood Planning for the City of Atlanta's Department of City Planning. I am very happy to have you here with us tonight. To those of you that are returning, welcome back. It's very good to see you here at NPU University. And for those of you that are here for the first time, we welcome you and thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us tonight. The City of Atlanta offers this program this year. For the first time, we're offering 39 classes that are free to all Atlantans. And our endeavor for this year and the years prior, we launched NPU University in 2019 with the goal of promoting equity by ensuring that residents in underserved communities had access to the same tools and resources as those that were with means. And I believe that we are moving quickly towards our goal of ensuring that Atlantans have access to information and the knowledge and the education that you need to sit at civic decision-making tables and make good, strong decisions and recommendations for your community, for development in your community. So I'm grateful that you're here, and I hope that the course meets your expectation. And I am joined tonight by our wonderful team. I can see Samantha Terry, who is our NPU University registrar, and our program manager. Sam, the sharing is going back and forth. It's driving me nuts. Let's keep it up, please. She's our NPU registrar and our program manager for training and education. I'm also joined tonight by Daniel Vasquez, who is our manager of resources and support. Tony McNeil is our program manager for outreach and training. And I believe we have a couple of interns here tonight too. I think I saw Zuri Mabry and Aaron Harris who are with us. A couple of our other team members couldn't be here or are joining later, but definitely wanted to introduce them. So I welcome you to CD 1004.004. That's the community development track of NPU University. And this class is Understanding Public Financing. It is a presentation by Invest Atlanta, who partnered with us to produce 4 classes in our community development series. And they will be talking tonight about tax allocation districts, bonds, new market tax credits, low-income housing tax credits, and other public financing tools. They will introduce themselves a little bit later on, in just a few minutes, that is. So quickly, we'll go over a couple of classroom rules for those of you that are here for the first time, or for others that need a reminder. Please do keep your microphone muted at all times. If you have a question or would like to make a comment during Q&A, You can raise your hand to get in the queue. And you can use reactions to clap or give a thumbs up if you'd like. You'll find a reactions button at the bottom of your screen. And all questions must be relevant to course content. You will hear either myself or Samantha or someone from our team reiterating that throughout the Q&A period and possibly throughout the class. We do like to remind participants in our program that although this program is produced by the City of Atlanta and tonight in conjunction with Invest Atlanta, these classes are not political in nature, and we don't want to bore students with political discourse. So we do ask that you maintain our classroom rules and only pose questions and comments that are relevant to course content. I'll show you how to raise your hand if you don't know. If we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. You can click on reactions at the bottom of your screen. You will see a button that says reactions. If you click that, you'll get a small pop-up that says raise hand, and then you can select raise hand to do that. And the next, I think, final slide, or is that it? All right, so I'll be introducing Invest Atlanta's team. Well, they will introduce themselves. Before we do that, this is a really good time to, if you don't have a pen and paper, please do grab something with which you can take notes so that you'll remember your questions when it's time to ask them. If you have an NPU University pen, you get extra points for that. I'm kidding. But yeah, if you have a pen, piece of paper, please do grab that. I ask that everyone please be patient with us. I know everyone has experienced for the last couple of years that we are living in a virtual world, and sometimes that comes with technology issues and problems. And so if we do experience any sort of delay or anything like that, we will continue to move on as best we can. Please be patient in the event that that happens. All right, without further ado, I am going to, I have the pleasure of introducing to you a member of Mayor Dickens' cabinet and the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of Invest Atlanta, who will give you greetings and introduce her team, Dr. Eloisa Clementich. Thank you so much, Dr. Clementich, for being here with us tonight.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate you inviting us, and I'm really looking forward to participating. And I'm so excited that so many of you are interested in new market tax credits. Stephen was super excited, and our low-income housing tax credits and our bonds and our TADs. These are pretty interesting tools. They're very unique. So I think it's great that you're taking the time to understand them. I will tell you that it does take a moment. You're going to get a lot of information on each of them. So don't feel compelled to get it all in. If there's more information you need after, let us know. It does take a second. They're pretty complex tools, very good tools, but pretty complex. So make sure you've got everybody's contact information. If there's anything anyone on the team can follow up with, we'd be happy to follow up and answer any further questions you may have. I also just want to say just a shout out to the team. You're going to have an opportunity to hear from what I think is some of the most stellar professionals in their field. They not only have a passion for what they do, they know their products really, really well. And so leverage that, take advantage. I'm very proud to work alongside each of them, and I continue to learn more about the tool, more about how we can leverage our resources, because these individuals are very, very committed. And so I want to thank the team, the Invest Atlanta team, for all their work. I'm going to stop talking so we can jump right into the today's topic, but want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest, and just know that you have some really, really committed folks. I love to say we're not perfect, but man, we are really trying to ensure that we leverage every tool that we can so we get the biggest impact we can in the city of Atlanta to ensure that everyone could partake in the benefit. And we really are committed to equity. And so I'm excited about this tool and what you're going to learn today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Lewis, who's been doing a great job for us and our involvement, and to say thank you to the team for everything you're doing. Michelle.
Thank you, Dr. Clementage. Hey, everybody. I'm Michelle Lewis. I am the Community Engagement Specialist for Invest Atlanta. I have been there for about almost 10 years, and I absolutely love my job, love my team. We are made up of quite a few sort of sub-organizations, if you will, to include the Beltline, the Women's Entrepreneur Initiative, also known as WE, IRFA, which is the Urban Residential Finance Authority, and they stay really busy with down payment assistance. We've also got the Atlanta Urban Redevelopment Agency, WorkSource Atlanta, to help with making sure Atlantans have jobs, and then the Downtown Development Authority. All of these work really very closely together to make certain that we are building a prosperous and equitable economy in the city of Atlanta. Our vision is to make Atlanta the most economically dynamic and competitive city in the world, but we also are working very hard to advance the global competitiveness by growing a strong economy, vibrant communities, and increasing economic and equitable prosperity for Atlantans. Now, we are a pretty lean organization, but we break down into different departments under 3 different divisions. So economic development, community development, and workforce development, I'm sorry. Tonight, you're gonna hear from team members from the community development side of the organization. But as you can see, those 3 developments, or those 3 organizations, 3 divisions, work very closely in making sure that everything gets done, and we're supported by some awesome team members in compliance, legal, financing, and marketing. All right, this is when I get to turn this over to Stephen. Stephen has been really, really excited about this. We're gonna have to make sure that he's not too excited with his presentation tonight. But it is my honor. I've been working with Stephen for a long time, and he's amazing at what he does. And he's gonna take it from here to talk to you about New Markets tax credits.
Thanks, Michelle. Hey, everyone. I'm Stephen Mcrae, the Director of New Market Tax Credits at Invest Atlanta and the President of Atlanta Emerging Markets, Inc. Really appreciate everyone being here. I think this is such a cool, unique program, and just glad you guys are taking time out of your evening to do this. I will say, I do think it was a strategic decision, probably putting new markets first. Tax credits can be a little dry, but want to make sure we keep it snappy, and we'll try and blow through this, but happy to answer any questions, and definitely be at the 10,000 foot level, but happy to follow up after with any specific questions or even schedule a time to go into a deeper dive. But first of all, want to do a few things. Want to do a quick synopsis of where this tool sits in the general ecosystem of Invest Atlanta. I want to talk about a little bit of the background on the program, its history, touch very briefly on how it works, and then a few types of projects that are good fits for this tool. So if you're out in the community or see a project you think could be a good fit or resource, then happy to have them sent our way. So the New Market Tax Credit tool is a little bit different than most of the other tools you'll hear about tonight. It's actually a federal tax credit tool. So these are federal tax dollars, not local tax credit, City of Atlanta dollars, which makes it a little bit unique. And it was created by the federal government back in the year 2000, really to help drive job creation, private investment, and increase services in lower income communities. And so back in 2005, Invest Atlanta decided they wanted to go after these tax credits. And unfortunately, they realized they weren't eligible to do it. So they had to create a separate community development entity, a CDE, in order to be able to apply for and ultimately receive those credits. So back in 2005, they created Atlanta Emerging Markets, which was one of those sub companies that Michelle showed on one of those first few slides, to be able to go after those tax credits. And since then, have been pretty successful. Have won $308 million in the tax credits since 2007, including 50 in the last allocation round. And Eloisa would kick me if I didn't mention that we were one of only 2 entities in the state of Georgia that received those credits. So it's a very competitive tool, and we're competing with organizations throughout the entire country, big banks, groups that have national reach. We are only focused on the city of Atlanta. So we are very tightly focused on making sure that our neighborhoods and our communities have access to this federal tool. The organization does have a unique 9-member board of directors that is separate than the Invest Atlanta board of directors and makes its own investment decisions. And we'll talk a little bit about how we evaluate projects and ultimately make that. But Amy, and I am going to slip and call it Amy a few times, Atlanta Emerging Markets, we use the acronym AMY for short, has been around for 17 years now and has done a lot of great work through the projects we financed. We'll go to the next slide. So I mentioned this tool was started in the year 2000 and really is meant to do two things: job creation and accessible services for residents that live in census tracts that qualify for this tool. Those census tracts are based on poverty rates and median family income, but it really is about making sure that private investment flows to these communities and is creating accessible services and jobs for the people that live there. So we're not looking for a big downtown skyscraper office project that's going to create 700 jobs. That's not a fit for new markets. We'd rather see opportunities that are creating jobs that have growth trajectory for residents, maybe have training involved, offer higher pay, offer benefits, or maybe healthcare, education, other services that are lacking in areas. So we'll walk through the different types of projects this tool can finance, but at the end of the day, that's really why this was created. It's over the last 20 years, it's supported across the country 6,400 projects, created more than 1 million jobs, and has really touched all 50 states. I think last year, 45 states had an entity in them that was awarded these credits. So they really try and make sure that the entire country has access to these credits, including rural areas. Again, we're focused just on the city of Atlanta, a very urban environment. So I'll get into a little bit more details on how it works and the types of projects, but I think it's important to kind of understand the big benefit of why people are interested in new markets. It really does one important thing. It helps bring private investment to a project that is creating impact in the city. And that private capital is structured in a really flexible way. It is low cost, generally 1% to 2% interest, and with a 7-year term. And you're paying interest-only payments on that money for the 7 years. So you're talking about very, very low monthly or annual payments for 7 years. And then after that 7 years is up, a big portion of the money that we bring to the table through that private investor is forgiven and essentially turns into almost like a deferred grant. I hate saying that on a recorded Zoom call, but I think that's the easiest way to kind of define it. So that's the big carrot for why organizations pursue this tool, is you're getting this kind of deferred money that doesn't have to be repaid and essentially transitions into a grant. So we can go to the next slide. Great. So there's several big players in this tool and in this industry. The first is the federal government. Congress gives the federal government new market tax credit allocation authority every year. And the federal government, the US Department of the Treasury, decides who is going to get that new market tax credit dollars. Again, they get groups from across the country that apply for this. And there's generally about a 30% success rate for groups that are applying. And the federal government is responsible for doling it out to organizations, to other CDEs, where they think it's going to have the most impact. And so every year, CDEs have the opportunity to apply for these tax credits. There's one application cycle that's open for about a month and a half every year. And groups like Atlanta Emerging Markets apply for it. And you have to show a strong pipeline of projects that represent the types of deals you'd want to fund if you are successful. And then it also asks about your track record and what you've done in the past. So the federal government then decides to give money to CDEs, and say, for example, they decide to give Atlanta Emerging Markets $10 million of new markets allocation. Well, then once you have it, you have to figure out how to spend it and get the highest impact for the city and for the organization. So we have a pipeline of projects that we work on, and say, for example, we really want to support a healthcare clinic on the West Side. So we will commit our $10 million of new market tax credit to that health clinic. But the big issue is you also have to find a new market tax credit investor that is willing to partner with you to make that happen, make that deal happen. So the tax credit alone don't mean much to Invest Atlanta, right? We don't have that much tax liability. It's really meant for more massive banks that have these hundreds of $1 million tax bills, right? So the new market tax credit investors are usually pretty large banks. Think the Truists of the world, the JP Morgan Chase, Capital One, Wells Fargo. So what they'll do is they will buy our $10 million of new market tax credits and in exchange provide a chunk of equity capital that can go towards the project. And so with that kind of partnership, we're helping to bring that private new market tax credit investor money to a project that ultimately we jointly decide to support because we believe it's going to have strong community impact and raise the level of services or job creation in the communities that we want to see. There's typically other funders. I think it's really important to mention that new market tax credits is a gap financing tool. So we really come in at the end when projects have either raised philanthropic dollars, they may have put in a large portion of their own equity, they may have taken a bank loan, but they just aren't able to reach the full capital stack that they need to complete the project successfully. So they'll apply for us, and then that's really a big part of our but-for analysis is how to make sure that our funding is going to fill a capital stack and get the maximum impact. So very often we have to then partner with foundations, banks, CDFIs, other government tools to make sure that the other 80–85% of the project costs and the capital stack are there, and then that the new markets is coming in at the end to really finalize the deal and make sure they have 100% of their financing. And then the new market projects, we'll talk about in a second what makes a good new markets deal, but those are typically for-profits, nonprofits that are having high community impact and doing good work in the community. So we can go to the next slide. So these are the types of projects that receive new market tax credits. You can see there's kind of two main categories, industrial, mainly manufacturing, job creation projects, and then also community facilities. The community facilities, think YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs, education projects, youth centers. It's a little flexible, but those are the two category types that take up a bulk of the industry. Then there's a few others that are interesting: healthcare, grocery, mixed use. You'll see at the top that housing is not a really popular use for this program. That's by design. There's specific rules that govern how much new markets can be used in housing projects. So we do see a lot of mixed use projects where the new markets can help cover the retail component of the mixed use. And then you'll see another tool like the low-income housing tax credit or tax allocation districts that may come in and support the housing. But in a nutshell, these are the main categories. This data is a little bit old. They're in the process of redoing it. I think the community pie slice would probably be a little bit bigger. The mixed use would probably be a little bit smaller. Maybe housing up a tick or two, healthcare probably up a tick or two. But generally, these are the types of projects that make a good new markets deal. But here's kind of the big, most important slide. So if you're looking out in the community and you see a project that you think might make a good fit, there's a couple characteristics that really make a strong new markets deal. You can see there's almost a dividing line in the middle of the slide. The first two items on this list are almost non-negotiables. They are non-negotiables. The first is the project has to be located in what the U.S. Department of Treasury calls a low-income community. And that's defined as a census tract that has a poverty rate of greater than 20% or 80% of the median family income. So there's mapping tools. If you search Novogradac New Market Tax Credit Map or Cohen-Resnick New Market Tax Credit Map, there's tools that you can plug in an address and it'll show you in a big red district if your project is eligible or not eligible. And there's really no getting around that map. So that's the first thing, is you have to be in an eligible census tract. The second is the size. This is a very complicated and thorough and robust tax credit program. And so there are a lot of expensive lawyers, consultants, tax credit consultants, auditors, financial firms. And so the brain damage, the fees, doesn't make economical sense for the project or for the CDEs to undergo these projects if the net benefit isn't going to be high enough. And so for that reason, projects are right around the $4.5–5 million range in total project cost as a minimum. There's really no maximum. It's all on how much new market tax credit allocation a project can support. So for example, the Atlanta Community Food Bank raised, I think it was $40–50 million in the tax credits, whereas the smaller project may be $5 million. So there really is a $5 million minimum floor, and then almost an infinite kind of ceiling. There really is no ceiling. So once you get past those two kind of baseline metrics, location and at least $5 million, then the different CDE groups are evaluating different items. They're evaluating the impact that this project's going to have on the community. They're looking at the need. What is the but for? Why do you need this money? And it has to be compelling. And then also they're looking at readiness. So because this is a competitive program for CDEs to get this money, they need to make sure that they're putting their deals into projects that are actually going to close. And so that means that a lot of times we have to have a building permit in hand. You have to have a maximum price contract in hand before these deals can close. And so a lot of times we'll work for projects on maybe 5–6 years before they're really ready to access this tool. So we love getting introduced to projects early in the planning stage and put it in our pipeline, have it on our radar. But the closing is really at a very unique point in the project's life cycle where they have raised a big chunk of their financing. They're missing just a little piece, and new markets can help bridge that gap, bring that last little chunk of capital, and really get you on your way to building out the project. So those are kind of the other factors we are evaluating. I think impact is probably the biggest one, coupled with need. We want to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck. Again, this is one where we are competing. We want to make sure that Atlanta is getting the best benefit, but we also want to make sure as an organization, we're funding competitive projects so we can get more of these credits and do more deals in Atlanta. Go to the next slide. So finally, this is not a permanent part of the federal tax code. So this is something that could go away in a few years. Potentially, you have no guarantee on any given year that we're going to have tax credit allocation. So for example, Atlanta Emerging Markets could be sitting on $50–60 million of tax credits, or we could have zero. It just depends on how much the federal government awards us, and if they award us, and then how many deals we funded to date. But I do think the timing is interesting. We typically apply in the fall, and they typically announce awards in the fall the following year. There's currently $5 billion of tax credits that they will award this fall. It used to be 3.5, so now there's 5. And again, it's an extremely competitive tool for Atlanta Emerging Markets and other CDEs to apply. The thing I'll mention though is, if Atlanta Emerging Markets for some reason doesn't have new market tax credits, there's also 50–60 other CDEs that may have them and oftentimes love to do deals in Atlanta. And so just because Invest Atlanta or Atlanta Emerging Markets doesn't have this tool available in-house, we have the connections and the resources to be able to facilitate a new market transaction with other partners in the industry and other folks that may have it. So I think that's an important characteristic to mention too. And then finally, we're constantly trying to get this renewed permanently in the federal tax code. It does have bipartisan support in Congress and received a 5-year extension in 2020. So we have a few more years of this being a guaranteed new market tax credit award, but we are seeking to make this permanent. And that is always kind of the caution that we operate under, is this, there's always the possibility that this goes away in the future. But we have been trying to be incredibly thorough with our applications and sourcing deals and pipeline and working with partners to make sure we're funding the best deals. And we've had great success, again, $308 million deployed to date, and would love to talk to anyone who may have deals they think could be a good fit for this and include them in our application or have them in our pipeline. And yeah, it's just a very interesting but complicated tool. So thank you all. Really appreciate taking the time and happy to answer any questions at the end. But I think going to pass it over to here, Samira, who's going to talk about the tax allocation districts.
Actually, we're going to go right over to Vicky.
Okay, that's great.
Stephen
Vic.
just didn't want to introduce me. Thank you, Stephen. Now, hey, good afternoon or good evening to everyone. Welcome to those that have not been a part of the NPU, and great to be able to speak to those that have been on these NPU universities with us throughout. What I'm going to talk about today is some of the multifamily housing financing tools. You'll hear part of them from me and then part of them from our colleague Samira in the next section. So Michelle, if you don't mind, or who, I'm sorry, that's who's passing it. So one of the incentives that we have is tax exempt bonds. And as Michelle introduced some of the entities under Invest Atlanta earlier, was URFA, the Urban Residential Finance Authority. And URFA was created back in 1979 in order to do tax exempt bond financing with those housing tax credits. And so when that happened, it allowed for the city of Atlanta to receive its own allocation in order to do affordable housing in the city limits of Atlanta, and which we are very fortunate because everyone else in the state of Georgia has to compete for those other allocation dollars throughout the state. So we say, why would developers want to use tax exempt bonds? And it's for our larger transactions that are normally, we look at anything that's 70 units or more as a larger transaction that it could be financially feasible to do a tax exempt bond transaction. And so the question is, why would they want to do that, right? And that's because they're very attracted to the developers because they get lower interest rates than they would for a conventional loan. And they can either be floating or variable rates, which is what used in most of our transactions. And they also give them the ability to have access to those federal low-income housing tax credits, which is different from the new markets tax credits that Stephen was just introduced to you guys. And so we leverage those with our 4%. And the 4% tax credits were created in 1986 because it was very difficult to do affordable housing. And so at that time, President Reagan created this program for developers to give them an extra incentive to create affordable housing and make it more attractive to those developers. And so with the tax exempt bonds, we can do up to 100% financing, like I stated, leveraging the 4% tax credits. And with those come an affordability period. And what that means is that we restrict those units for at least 15 years. If they get the tax credits, they're going to be restricted for at least additional 15. So that's about 30 years, right? And a lot of times we talk about affordability. What does that mean? How long it is? And I know sometimes you guys are, we talk about affordability, but I want to say restricted, because that means you have to have those units remain restricted at those affordable income limits that are given out annually for that time period, at least 15 years. And so with tax exempt bonds, you have the option of doing 20% of your units set aside at those 50% AMIs, area median incomes, or you have the option to do 40% at 60% AMIs. And we like to see our deals come in with at least 15% market units, unless it's a senior housing or already has a HAP contract on it. And then also if the developer may be using what we've called and seen as of the last few years, developers have been utilizing this income averaging is also acceptable for Invest Atlanta. And developers must have experience with doing tax exempt bonds and low-income housing tax credit financing. The low-income housing tax credit financing tool, that incentive actually comes from the state. They're the ones who issue low-income housing tax credits. And in the state of Georgia, what's unique about our state is that we do federal tax credits, but we also do state credits. And not a lot of states do both. And so that's what makes it a little bit more attractive to do transactions in Georgia. And so the developer will also, he must have some financial capacity. In other words, you got to have your little financial background to kind of assist with that, because these are really large transactions and it takes a lot of work and doing it. And you got to be, because along with tax exempt bonds and all of our incentives, we do compliance, right? So we have a team that works with us to ensure that the developer is adhering to what the requirements are in that timely fashion. So I want to also talk about in 2021, we issued a new housing opportunity bond fund program. And I know that you hear conversations about how construction costs have gone up. We're having difficulty getting deals done. We can't get them closed. It's a delay in getting materials. So everything takes a place. And with that happening, we find that we have gaps in financing, meaning where the deals are needing additional assistance in order to make their transaction work. And so one of the things that we have for our large multifamily deals is we have this where we do second mortgage loans, very soft, fluid money. Interest rates can be from 1% to 5%, and but it can't exceed more than 50% of the development cost. And it's a maximum. The maximum amount is actually 1.5, unless you're doing over 200 units, then you possibly can get the $2 million. And again, we ask that you set aside 30% of these units at that 60% AMI level. And we do amortization. We can go up to 45 years, but most of the time it's at the length of the conventional lender. Whatever your conventional loan is, if it's 30, 35, we're going to go out to that too. And these funds can use to be financed for, I think a couple of things fell off. This is for acquisition, but it's also for the construction. And so, meaning that we really like to see our money go in for construction and pursue with your other financing tools that you utilize. And then even for the small developer, we have some funds that were set aside. About 5.6 million is available. And this again is for any developments that are at 70 units and less. Again, the same rates, 1% to 5%, up to 45-year AM schedule, and cannot be more than 50% of the project cost. The maximum amount is $700,000. And that just equates to, just depending on the on what you're doing. For a small multifamily guideline, if you're going to use those 61 to 80% AMI levels, you can get at least $50,000 per affordable unit. If you do 31 to 60%, you could get $60,000 per affordable unit. And if you give us that deeper affordability, what we like to see, that 0 to that 30% range, you could get approximately $70,000 per affordable unit. And so that's for our small multifamily housing. And again, the max amount is $700,000. We also have some funds that are set aside for our the nonprofit set aside. We do this for single family and also multifamily development. We share this pot of money. Again, it's the nonprofit must be the owner, developer, or the project sponsor. And again, the AM schedule is same up to the 45, and the rates, all of that is still similar. And we want you to have at least 30% of your units at 60% AMI. And funds are used for the acquisition, construction, renovation, or pre-development costs. With the pre-development costs that we're using, you will enter into an agreement to ensure that once you've done that pre-development, that you come back and you're going to make those units affordable. And so we work through those with the terms with the developer. Okay, Michelle, next slide, please. Yeah, so And mine's gonna be short and sweet, right? I only have 2 slides, so I'm gonna pass the bucket in a sec. So the Beltline TAD increment, one of the things that we're seeing that there's a high cost around the Beltline and to maintain the affordability. So we want to ensure that we had some kind of mechanism to offset some of those costs, and so that we can maintain the to maintain some affordable units around the Beltline. And so with that, we're able to use some Beltline TAD increment dollars. And we request that you have at least, the site has at least 20 units, and it has to be located within the Beltline boundaries. A lot of times you say, well, I'm in the Beltline, but you're actually in the overlay. And so if you're in the overlay, unfortunately, you have to adhere to that requirement of the inclusionary zoning, but you don't get the benefit of the incentive for the Beltline, but you could come to me and get the incentive for the HOB money. So we didn't leave the overlay out altogether. And so it has to be, up to at least 10% of the project cost, less the developer fee. And these are actual grants and not loans. So that's a benefit too. And the maximum per project can be $1 to $2 million, depending on the capital stack and the number of affordable units. Again, the ranges are between the 50 and 70,000, depending on the population served, and either 25% at 80% or 20% at 60% AMI levels. And it comes with the 15-year affordability period. And of course, our rents are all based on the area median incomes from that comes from published from HUD on an annual basis. Okay. And now another one that we have, a funding source that we have available, and this is geographically restricted, which is the Vine City Housing Trust Fund. This was created back in 1979 when the first dome was actually demolished, and they wanted to ensure that funds went back into the community. So this fund was created, and 79 was a long time ago, but we still have a little bit of money in that pot that we still can use for housing there, and which we've seen to use on a lot more of our smaller deals, that we have in that community. Again, those are second mortgage loans with low interest rates. It must be in the Vine City English Avenue communities. Again, not up to more than 50% of your project costs. And the max amount is $1 to $3 million, depending on capital stack and affordable units and funds available. We may need to reduce that. I'm not sure if we have $3 million in that account anymore. But again, the $50,000 to $70,000 per unit. And we ask that you either have 20% at 80% AMI or 15 at 60% with a 15-year restricted affordability period. And our last one that we like to talk about is our lease purchase bonds. Lease purchase bonds is a bond for title. It doesn't help you on the front end with capital stack, but it definitely helps you on the back end. This one here gives you a graduated tax incentive for 10 years. So first year, you'll pay 50% of your taxes, increasing 5% over the 10 years. So year 11, you should be at the max paying your full taxes. And we ask that you have at least 10% of those units set aside at 60% AMI or 15% at 80% AMI. And the tenants shall not pay more than 30% of their income for rent, inclusive of all mandatory fees. And so that is another opportunity for developers. And we see this one comes to us most of the time. We've done a couple of deals with low income housing tax credits. But most of the time, these are deals that are done where we would not get any affordable units, and they want to come to us for a lease purchase. So this is a benefit for us to kind of maintain affordable units throughout the city. And so that does conclude my presentation. And next you will have my colleague Samira for Tax Allocation District.
Good evening, everyone. I am Samira Ajani, and I am the Assistant Director for Westside Initiative. I have the privilege of working on our community development team under the leadership of Jennifer Fine. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about our Tax Allocation District program. Next slide. and forgive me because I'm having a few technology challenges. My panel does not seem to want to cooperate with me, so I'm going to try to get through this the best that I can. So we'll start with what are tax allocation districts. Tax allocation districts are a financing tool that have been established through the Georgia Redevelopment Powers Act, which allows the Atlanta City Council to establish particular districts throughout the city to create a catalytic investment in designated areas. Typically, these are areas that are underserved or have been defined as an area of blight. So these are public dollars, as the name of the program suggests. These are public tax dollars that serve to fund various redevelopment activities. Okay, so this funding source itself is it provides incremental taxes. So we're looking at the tax base that has been frozen at a particular period in time, depending on when that particular tax district was created. And all new increment of taxes that has been generated by new development is what is providing us the funding source for those particular tax districts. The taxing entities that are allowed to participate in the tax allocation districts include the City of Atlanta, Fulton County, and Atlanta Public School District. Depending on what tax allocation district we're referring to, there are different mechanism or different capital stacks that each of these entities will contribute to each of those districts. But it's safe to say that this is where those tax dollars are generated from. Okay, so we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned, the tax allocation districts are generated through incremental increases in taxes. So it's also important to mention that those dollars are held within those boundaries. So currently there are 10 tax allocation districts that have been created across the city. Just to give you an example, we have our West Side TAD, that is a geographic area. Those dollars can only be spent inside of that geographic area, and they cannot be spent across other tax allocation districts. So all dollars that are generated within the West Side TAD are there to fund projects that exist within that geographic area. And similarly, East Side TAD, all the dollars that are generated inside of the East Side TAD are to support projects in that boundary, and they cannot be commingled. Some other important pieces of information about tax allocation districts. These programs are designed as grants. So they're not loans to developers. They're designed as grants. However, they are provided on a reimbursable basis. So that developer must also demonstrate that they have resources already provided in their total development costs, which may come from equity, which may come from other financing tools, or primary loans for those projects. So we view these funds as a gap financing for projects that are funded. The types of projects that can be funded through the tax allocation district are slightly different than what you heard Vicki present on. We focus a lot on housing here, and affordable housing is very important to the work that we do here at Invest Atlanta. But within the tax allocation district, we can use funding for a variety of needs, which include capital improvements, public works improvements, demolition costs, renovations and rehab. Some acquisition costs may be eligible. And we are also providing funding towards commercial projects, which is not something that is necessarily eligible use in some of our other financing tools. that Vicky just mentioned. And you can go ahead and move to the next slide as well. This is just an illustration discussing how this mechanism works in terms of where the tax base is frozen. I know I don't have the control of the mouse, so I can't really point to things very easily, but you know, as at the bottom here, you see where the tax base has been frozen. The dark blue shaded area is demonstrating where that tax increment has been created through the increase in tax values of properties that have been redeveloped within that boundary. And then this vertical column here that you see at the end is where the tax base is restored at the end of the life of the tax allocation district. So tax allocation districts don't go on forever. They are mechanisms that can be renewed, and that is typically negotiated between those taxing bodies in terms of when the tax allocation district will sunset. But once that period has come to term, then the full amount of the tax base is restored to the community. Next slide. Okay, and as I mentioned, we have 10 tax allocation districts that operate around the city. There are several that are currently closed that have, you know, exhausted their resources from the TAD, and we're currently just in the process of repaying the bonds that were serviced out of those districts. I will say that our most robust tax allocation districts include our East Side TAD, our West Side TAD, and our Perry Bolton TAD. Our East Side TAD currently has roughly $66 million in available funding for new projects. That is followed by our Perry Bolton TAD, which has slightly under $8 million in funding that's available for new projects. And then our West Side TAD is the smaller amount of those, which is at about $8 million. And I say that those are our most robust tax allocation district because we can provide a variety of programs within in those TADs based on the available amount of funding to support developers with either any of the activities that I previously mentioned. There are four other TADs that are currently in operation, which are considered our corridor TADs. These are our Campbellton Road TAD, our Hallowell TAD, and that also kind of touches on some of the Martin Luther King corridor, our Metropolitan Parkway TAD, and our Stadium TAD. And out of these particular TADs, they produce a much smaller amount of increment, and there are fewer programs that we operate inside of those districts. And I think if you move to the next slide, I can speak a little bit more about the actual programs that we administer from each of these. So we have to start with our Ascension Fund, which is a program that we've created largely inside of our East Side TAD and our West Side TAD. And this is to provide gap financing for large-scale catalytic projects. And we can provide up to 10% of financing for all the eligible development costs for a project. Project sizes should be a minimum of $7.5 million. That's what we are gauging as that large scale, that threshold for large scale development. And projects must produce a minimum of 20 units of affordable housing and hold those affordable units for no less than 15 years. You know, that's kind of the standard for a lot of our housing programs here at Invest Atlanta. But you know, understanding how valuable these dollars are and how important affordable housing needs are in the city. Oftentimes when we get into negotiations around projects with developers, this is one of those areas that we look to possibly or potentially increase that affordability period beyond 15 years. So at times you may see affordability periods that go up to even 30 years. So in order to qualify for this level of funding, projects must include at least a minimum of 3 units that are for sale and 5 units and that's particularly for nonprofit developers, and 5 units for developers that are for profit. And because this particular source of funding also includes activities that are available for commercial spaces, we ask that any project that is more than 5,000 square feet, that they provide set-asides for those businesses to receive reduced rent. And so you'll see that kind of as a theme through some of these next projects that are programs that I discussed as well. So the nuances are just slightly different with our Resurgence Fund. This gap financing is available for small to mid-sized projects and can provide a larger amount larger amount into the capital stack. At about 40% of the total development cost will go up to about 40%. It may range anywhere between 25 and 40%, and it really just depends on what the need is. We evaluate that on a case-by-case basis. And then again, you'll see the difference in the scale of funding that is required, the minimum amount of funding that is required. So we went from 7.5 as the minimum for our Ascension Fund to projects as small as $100,000 and then less than $7.5 million in total development costs. The maximum amount of funding that a project can be awarded from the Resurgence Fund is $750,000. And I have a little asterisk there because that is generally the standard. Again, you know, we have some flexibility, and particular TADs, such as the West Side TADs, we have some additional incentive that we can add up to $250,000 of additional incentives that we can add if a developer is providing a certain amount of affordability and looking at their capacity to provide deeper levels of affordability. Again, these projects are required at a minimum of 5 units for rental housing, and with that minimum of 15 years. For sale housing is the same at 3 units and 5 units respectively for nonprofit developers and for-profit developers with the same commercial rents requirement. Next slide. Okay, so the Facade Improvement Fund is a program for commercial properties that operates specifically in the East Side and West Side TADs. And this often covers a lot of the downtown area where these two TADs kind of meet. So what this program does is allow commercial establishments to receive up to 2/3 of financing towards exterior improvements, covering up to $200,000. So it's important to mention that this is an exterior improvement program. And additionally, unlike our Resurgence Grant program and our Ascension Fund program, this is not considered gap financing. This is really reimbursing that property owner or developer for amounts up to 2/3 of their costs or $200,000. The minimum project size that we look at for our Facade Improvement Fund is $30,000, and projects must be less than 80,000 square feet. Pay-as-you-go is another financing tool that we utilize mostly in our corridor TADs. And the way that these programs have been designed, or the reason why this particular program has been designed for the corridors, is because there isn't a lot of increment in those particular TADs. So what this financing tool allows is for that developer to receive a portion of their tax in a reimbursement post-construction. You know, I don't think I gave the numbers for the corridor TADs, but roughly those TADs tend to hover around 1.1 to $2.5 million. So it would be, as you can see, there's not necessarily a lot of resource available to fund at those higher amounts, but it does allow for us to provide some reimbursement of costs to those projects post-construction through their tax reimbursement. So the main qualifications for a project that is receiving pay-as-you-go financing is that the project must be a minimum of $5 million, and that those units, particularly if there's residential units in that project, have to be held at certain levels of affordability. So they must provide levels of affordability at either 60% of AMI or less, or 80% of AMI at less over a set period of time. I believe it's 15 years for the 60% of AMI and 10 years for 80% of AMI. I may have those numbers slightly wrong. It's hard to keep up with all these numbers that get thrown around, but I think you can understand the point that's being illustrated, that for every level of affordability that the developer provides, they have to hold those units affordable over a set number of years. And then some of our other programs that we operate, we have our Community Empowerment Fund that primarily operates out of the East Side TAD. Honestly, the program operates very similar to our Resurgence program. So the guidelines are very much the same as our Resurgence program. There's very little nuance between those two projects. And then our Small Business Improvement Grant is a program that we operate out of our Perry Bolton TAD, and also all 4 of our corridor TADs. Again, because there's not a great amount of increment in our corridor TADs, but we want to see some development activities happening in those areas. Our Small Business Improvement Grants have been made available to provide grants up to $20,000 for businesses or business operators to work on improvements to their exterior and interior. So that can pay for things like new windows, roofing, paving of your parking lot, or if you need system upgrades or want to do some retrofitting of the interior of your space, those are what those dollars have been made available for. $20,000, and I'm sure you all have heard the news lately, doesn't go very far in the construction world these days. But you know, it is an opportunity for businesses to make small changes to their businesses. I don't really want to talk or go too much into detail about this particular program, largely because for a period of about 2 years, we'll be putting this program on pause because Invest Atlanta has recently received a grant from the Wells Fargo Open for Business program, which is going to allow us to provide these similar types of improvement grants to businesses throughout the city. And so because we wanted to level the playing field and make all things equal for businesses across the city, this particular program is going to be placed on hold. And our Wells Fargo program which we'll be announcing later this month, will be substituting this program over the next 2 years. Our Wells Fargo program will actually allow businesses to receive up to $50,000 in grant funding towards the restoration or improvement of their business. And I believe those are all the slides that I have on the presentation. Yes, they are.
Thank you, Samira. I think Samantha or Leah, this is where we go to questions.
Yeah, this is where we go to questions. Thank you all so much. That was so informative and really helpful. And after listening to that, I feel equipped to teach all 4 parts Jokes. I feel equipped to start all over and listen to it again. All right, so if any of you have questions, we are at that point where our team from Invest Atlanta is prepared to answer all of your questions. I see Mr. Martin has his hand up, followed by Ms. Causey and Ms. Brooks, in that order. Mr. Martin, and as a reminder, before we start, and I'll say this one more time, if at least one more time, please remember to keep all questions relevant to course content. Let's go, Mr. Martin.
Yes, so the big benefit to taxpayers from our tax allocation districts occurs when they're wound down, and the tax revenue is back in the general fund, but the city has never actually successfully wound down a tax allocation district, has it? And a follow-on to that is that the revenue in tax allocation districts include background growth, which can be a significant fraction of that tax allocation district and have nothing to do with new development.
Okay. So I don't necessarily know if I heard the question in your
Has the city
statement.
ever successfully wound down a tax allocation district? And does
Okay.
the tax increment in a tax allocation district include background growth?
Background growth. Okay, so the city has not, to my knowledge, actually closed any of their tax allocation districts. There has been a lot of discussion about closing tax allocation districts, but that has not actually come to pass as far as I know. There are several of our TADs that are not currently active. We are just in the repayment period, and those TADs will sunset based on the terms that are in those agreements for those particular TADs. And all of our TADs do have sunset periods associated with them. So at any time, those three taxing bodies that we covered do have the opportunity to determine whether or not to close those districts. So there's not an indefinite time period for those tax allocation districts to close.
They can be extended indefinitely, can't they?
They can be extended, but they're extended for a definite amount of time. They don't remain open indefinitely.
But they can be re-extended and re-extended.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Martin, and thank you, Samira. Ms. Causey, Carla Causey.
Hello, thank you. It's a pretty straightforward question. One, I guess a compound, if you will. I wanted to get the information on what site we would go to in order to see if the property lied within the authorized area where the funding is applicable. And the other is that with Atlanta, the unincorporated DeKalb County, and some parts of incorporated DeKalb County, but it's still Atlanta. Do you know right off the bat if those are excluded?
Are you speaking specifically about TADs?
Yes.
Okay. So, all of the properties that are included in tax allocation districts are registered and defined on Fulton County Tax Assessor's website. But an easy tool that I use is actually one that is manned by our city planning department through our GIS department. So if you visit gis.atlanta.gov, you can find a tool there that will say property information. If you type in the property information for your property that you're seeking information about, there will pop up on the screen a blue panel on the right-hand side of the screen. And down at the bottom of that panel, it'll indicate tax incentives, what tax incentives are covered by that particular property. And it will state which tax allocation district that property actually lies in.
And I can address the second question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can answer that one. So the second question was stated if a development is in the city of Atlanta and the developers pay the city of Atlanta taxes, then they are an eligible property. Because we have, Some are just kind of at that borderline, right? But yes, if they pay City of Atlanta taxes, they're an eligible development.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Carla, and thank you, Samira and Vicky. Ms. Brooks.
Okay, thank you very much. This is very informative. And I remember hearing the term IMPLAN as one of the tools that is used to measure or assess eligibility of applicants. I didn't hear any of you talk about, other than location and amounts of money, but what would be kind of data that would enter into your assessment tool, and is IMPLAN something that's in use? Because I heard it and wasn't able to get that question answered last time I heard it.
So this is Eloise. If you want, I can jump in, and then anyone else can. When it comes to IMPLAN, it's a data analysis tool that was created under Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is the one that runs it, and what they do is IMPLAN looks at the NAICS code of a certain industry and then does 10-year look back. So we get that tool updated every year. We at the business development side of the house use it more for analysis on impact. So all it really measures is your direct, indirect, and induced. So it's not really a tool that it's used for underwriting per se, but it's more of a tool that's used to, once we understand, we've done the underwriting, understand what the impacts are, we take that investment and drop and run the NAICS code based on that to see what is the economic impact. So it's trying to give us a sense. Again, it is a statistical analysis tool, so it's not a perfect science, but it gives us a good sense as if we make an investment of 20 million, what does it result in terms of impact of measuring the three: direct, based on the project; indirect, so it's a second level. So if you have a project and that project pays someone's salary, that would be an indirect, right? And then induced is now that someone, an individual, an employee has a salary, they go to a restaurant or they go to the dry cleaners. So that's why it's 3 out. But it just, more than anything, IMPLAN is used to give us a sense of what the impact is of the investments we are making and the projects we're investing in.
Okay, and so you mentioned the NAICS code. Could you spell that, please?
NAICS code. It's the North American Index Classification.
Oh,
and
index.
it's a federal designated number per industry. And so
Okay.
it's very, very specific.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you both for that. I think we have, I just lost my screen changed. 1 second.
Deborah Wathan.
Okay, I see the next couple of hands are Deborah Wathan, Daniel Solly, Chandra Farley. It's a good time to remind you, please make sure your questions are relevant to course content, and to raise your hand, you can use the reactions button at the bottom of the screen. We're doing this a little differently tonight. You notice the chat was turned off. So please do raise your hand by clicking the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a pop-up that says raise hand, and you can go ahead and raise your hand there. Ms. Wathan?
Yes, thank you. I was curious about all of these, so many of these projects have a component that is, for affordable housing. Who monitors that? I mean, I assume the developer will give you information annually, but who actually polices that and makes sure that they are giving these units to affordable housing?
I can step in to address that if you'd like, team. As I stated in my presentation, that we have a compliance department here at Invest Atlanta. And so there's 2 things that we do, right? When residents are being qualified to go into those units, the developer or the management company is required to submit to us on a monthly basis for any new residents going in, and then annually for any recertifications. We also, and that's on a monthly basis, right? And then annually we go out to the site and we do a file review. And we also have third-party inspectors that go out to those sites and do samplings of the units and look at the property to ensure that they're being maintained. And so we have a compliance period that compliance team that does that during our qualified project period. If they receive funding from other agencies, they also do DCA, Department of Community Affairs. They also have third-party inspectors that go out there to review. So if they get any funding from a public agency, we are watching and we are monitoring those.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that question and answer. I think Samantha has a question that came in via chat. Sam?
Yes, I have a question from Sarah Kim. The question is, where can we see the announcement for the Wells Fargo loan and where will it be posted? The Wells Fargo grant, I'm sorry.
Okay. Without giving too much away, you can expect to see something roll out towards the end of this month, and certainly by the 1st of August, we'll be doing a major push of information out through our social media channels, in addition to providing that information on our website. So you can always check on our website, and it will more than likely be posted under opportunities for small businesses. Or if we have a page, Eloisa, do we have a landing page for Wells Fargo?
Yes, I was jumping in, Samira. Thank you for calling. So the Wells Fargo Open for Business is a page on our website you can go to right now. And I would highly suggest if anyone knows any business or has a friend who's thinking of starting a business, for the first time, we have loans. Now, I get it. They're not grants. Grants are always beautiful, but we have loans that we can give out, and we've capped the interest rate at 3%. So, and there is some flexibility on when payments start. So for the first time, we're able to give loans to startup organizations, and this will be a great tool for them to use to be able to grow their business. So I would so there'll be several components. So the first component is the loans that has now been launched. As Samira mentioned, the improvement will be coming at the end of this month. And then there'll be one more program that will be coming in the Q4, which is a commercial down payment assistance, which is the first time in the Invest Atlanta's history that we're actually going to be able to support. And if you think about some of your mom and pop businesses that have been renting for years and years, we'd love for them to be able to purchase, because we're really thinking about gentrification and how we ensure that people do not get displaced. That's the key. No one should be displaced, either home or commercial side. So we have a tool to try to ensure that some of our local businesses can stay in the community. So excited about that tool, which will be coming out in Q4.
And if I could just jump in really quickly, this is Michelle. We will be hosting application webinars on Tuesday, the 20th. I'm sorry, is that Tuesday? I think that might be Wednesday, the 20th of July, next week at 8 a.m. and at 6 p.m. And if you go to our website, investatlanta.com, click on About Us, and then go to events, you'll see a calendar and a link to register to attend.
Awesome. I was trying to grab that link as well. But my computer is free.
We see it in the chat. It's in the chat, Leah. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I think Samira sent her bad computer juju over here.
Don't blame it on me. I had challenges from the moment I couldn't get my video to turn on. My video panel is like all over my different screens for some reason. So please forgive me for the distractions during my presentation.
Awesome. We've been dealing with this, all of us, the whole world.
Okay.
2.5 years. It is what it is at this point. Thank you. Mr. Solly, Daniel Solly, followed by Chandra Farley.
Hey, so my first question is, how is affordability determined? We talked a lot about affordability. We do a lot of single family, like that's kind of focuses single family housing authority. So Section 8, does that count as affordability if we're doing pairing with commercial, if we're doing, you know, some apartments with some, like how is affordability
Sure.
determined?
Vicky, me or you? There's a me or you question.
So affordability is determined, one, is led by the incentive that we have, and two, is guided by those AMIs or those the area median incomes that are given for, and I wish I could share my screen, and it'd be helpful kind of to have it. But it was those income levels are given down annually by HUD, right? So the area median income for Atlanta is $96,400. But that, you know, and I say this all the time, we in some of our communities, we're like, are you kidding me? Nobody makes that money, right? But it takes in Atlanta, Sandy Springs, I think Marietta. And so it takes all those incomes, and so that's where it's come from. And those are how those AMIs or those levels of affordability are. That's the structure that we follow. Okay. And so, like I said, it's all about incentives. So when you say you have some Section 8 or you have for rental, they would definitely probably qualify in there in those rents. But what we say is that you can't, you know, it's the max that you're doing. So if you're doing an apartment complex and we say 20% at 60% AMI, that means you cannot go above that 60% AMI level for those restricted units that you
So
have.
where do I find that 60%, that
Yeah,
AMI?
I can share. Can we? I mean, we can send that to
Vicky,
you.
I'm putting it in the chat.
Okay.
And I don't know, Tony, it's only letting me send it to, well, I'll send it to you, Leah. It's letting me send it. If you could post it on the chat to everyone, it has it on there. And
Sure
so you can
will.
click on it.
Yeah,
I
because
can
it's
send it
not
to
giving us.
I can only
Yeah.
send a direct message to you.
Right.
So there you go. Thank
There
you.
you go. Yep, that's it.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'll also add, just in terms of how those rents are calculated, those levels, they're calculated by the number of bedrooms. So those rents will vary based on the type of units that you have. If it's a 1-bedroom efficiency, 2-bedroom, and so forth.
Yeah.
The
There's
second
some serious
question.
methodology behind that, right? It's not just we wake up and say, here it is, and then it's split up. There's some numbers and everything that equates behind those numbers and those figures that are given to us.
Oh yeah. No, I know there's a method. I just want to figure it out so I can work backwards.
Daniel, if I can just clarify, these AMIs, area median income, are set by the federal government, by HUD, and they do it across the nation. So we pretty much take what HUD publishes so that it is consistent across, but you'll find HUD does this for every region across the nation.
Perfect.
And they'll vary annually. They recalculate those calculations each year.
And
So you'll see some variation from year to year.
I'll also add that Invest Atlanta actually conducted a class specifically on that topic, a whole entire 2-hour class on that topic. And we are working on getting the link to drop that in the chat. I tried to find it myself. I'm not that good at finding, apparently, but someone from our team will drop the link to that class in the chat.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Chandra Farley.
Yeah, thank you. What is the difference between workforce housing and affordable housing? I saw that in a couple of different places on some of the slides and have always wondered, is that income, like what that distinction is?
Okay, so I think that's usually tied to the level of affordability. So we consider anything that's at 80% or greater, anything that generally between 80 and 120% of area median income workforce housing. Affordable housing is really designed to look at providing those deeper levels of affordability for households that are making incomes at less than 60% of AMI.
Thank you. That was a good question, Chandra. Sammy, you have another question from the chat?
Yes. So we have a question from Janet Bobbitt. She's asking, can you all share what minimum credit scores are required for the Wells Fargo program? 3% loans, and what is the finance period? Is it 15 or 30 years, etc.?
So most of the loans, if I'm not mistaken, it's a 5-year term on the loans. I think we can go out a little bit longer depending on the startup and the amount. There is no minimum per se on the credit score because usually that would be probably a startup. Usually businesses will come in on an LLC and there probably won't be a credit score, but what we try to do is understand. So first and foremost is these are a grant that we receive from Wells Fargo. So we have the fiduciary responsibility to ensure they're good loans, but we're gonna make we're not in it to be a bank, we're not in it. So we want to ensure that we understand the situation. So let me give you an example. Sometimes bank will say, oh, you've got a bankruptcy, we're not giving you a loan. And we'll say, okay, business, we understand you have a bankruptcy in your records. Can you tell us what happened? Oftentimes we hear a family member got sick. I got divorced, which meant there was a break, but they've made payments. Everything else is strong. So they're really good. Then they have the bankruptcy and then they continue to be show great payment history. So we try to understand the situation. In that case, we will still continue to give that individual a loan. So it more so is understanding the situation that they're in to try to be responsive. So I hope that was helpful.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Is Carla's question next? Carla and then Daniel.
Oh, my fault. I think you answered my question. I should have took my hand down. I was gonna ask if the 96,400 was the 2022 number. And you answered that earlier. I didn't put my hand down.
All righty, no problem. Daniel, is your hand? I think I lowered your hand. Do you have another question?
Yeah, I raised it again.
Go ahead. No problem.
So during Stephen Spark talking about some 1% to 2% interest, 7-year loans. I was trying to figure out these are for-profit business, nonprofit, and then I've seen a bunch of notes on the slides that were second mortgage, some amount, 50%. So some of these grants, potential loans, potentially grants, are they second mortgages? Are they only? Is that all the leverage you can do on a project? That just didn't seem to be clear to me.
Yeah, so the new market financing gets structured as a loan. And so what happens is the money that the project brings to the table, generally that 80%, and the amount that the new markets investor brings to the table gets almost combined into one pot. And so when it's then structured out, it's structured as all that money together with the 1-2% interest loan. So it's a very in-depth, complicated structuring question that I'm happy to kind of connect you offline and walk you through, but it all gets jumbled together, and that 1% to 2% is for all the money for the 7 years.
Okay. All right.
So it usually isn't a first position.
Stephen, can you give some examples of some of our most recent ones?
Sure. So we've had a couple slides here that I think if we can circulate the deck, that'd be helpful. But the Atlanta Mission did a new low barrier homeless shelter. And so we were able to use philanthropic money that they had, equity that they had, and combined all of that with the new market's equity. And, the philanthropic dollars, the new market's dollars, and their private money all gets combined. And so it makes it a lot easier to have a lower interest rate when you're combining some of those free dollars in there as well. Did that answer your question, I hope?
I think connecting offline would probably be the best, but I love Atlanta Mission. They're awesome group. We support them heavily, so that was good.
And Daniel, these are good questions. New market tax credits, I kid you not, it's a very complex transaction. They do whole graphs to show you how the flow of funds. So I happen to sit on that board and I have to look at that very closely every single time. So just know it's a very complicated transaction, but it works. At the end of the day, it's working.
Perfect. Awesome.
Daniel, I just want to thank you for asking Stephen a question. He loves talking.
Yeah, it was a pity new markets question. I appreciate them all. Thanks, Daniel.
You're welcome. I'm just here to help.
Mr. Martin.
Yes, with some of these things that we've discussed, and I'm thinking in particular about the lease purchase bonds, that the Atlanta Development Authority is in competition with other entities, in that case, DAFC, and it's not a competition that benefits the taxpayer because the winner is the entity that wastes the most money. And I'm wondering, with regard to these other programs, are there similar dynamics at play? I know that we were told with the new market tax credits that there were other players in Atlanta using that same tool. And so is that in fact a synergy or is it a competition?
That's a great question. We typically don't see it as a competition. There's enough deal flow in the city. And again, this is a federal tool. So the amount of federal dollars we can attract here, the more the merrier. So we actually partner a lot with different organizations on projects, and we may split it. We may put in a chunk of our New Markets dollars and they may put in a chunk of theirs. And also if another group from outside the city is willing to put their dollars in Atlanta, then we may say, that's great. We want to see this project happen in Atlanta. And that gives us an opportunity to move down to the next project on our pipeline list. So very much a cooperative vibe, not as competitive as maybe some of those other items that you had mentioned.
All right, well, this is going to be the last call for questions only because I don't see any hands raised. We do have a little bit of time left, but I'm happy to give you back 30 minutes of your evening. So if there are no questions, we'll get ready to wrap up. One thing that I want to add, because I'm personally excited by this, and I think the City of Atlanta, the Department of City Planning, our MPU team, and the MPUs are excited as well. Last year, we worked together with Invest Atlanta to develop a way for MPUs to make recommendations to Invest Atlanta on tax allocation district projects, similar to the recommendations that the MPU, and in fact, that was mirrored by the program that we have in place now for zoning review board applications and board of zoning adjustment application, similar to the recommendations that come from MPUs that inform the deliberation process at the city for rezonings, for zoning variances, for special events, and for alcohol licenses. Invest Atlanta also considers MPU recommendations as they deliberate on TAD applications. And as a reminder for any of you that are new to the MPU system or to MPU University or to the world of engagement in Atlanta, the MPUs don't make decisions, but they do make recommendations. They review applications, they vet these applications, they ask questions of applicants, and then they vote on a recommendation to make to the appropriate body. In this case, Invest Atlanta does now receive recommendations from the MPUs, and their board members review those recommendations and consider it as a part of the deliberation process. I do see, and obviously that's a win, it's a step in the right direction for engagement and for amplifying the voices of the public. I see one other question from Ray Thomas, and if there are no others, we'll go ahead into our wrap up.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to ask a question, and thank you for putting on this forum. My question is that in one of the earlier charts, it mentioned that housing affordability is one of the key components or key missions or objectives of Invest Atlanta. And then later on, there was a discussion about the AMI and how it applies and so forth. What I'm struggling with is, as Invest Atlanta and other agencies try to deal with this affordability issue, it seems to be getting worse, not better. And I'm wondering if there's been any discussion at all about taking another look at these percentages, the 10, the 20, and the 30% of AMI in order to be eligible. Perhaps, I know the federal government, someone said the federal government established those parameters. Well, maybe someone needs to take a look at those parameters and maybe change them a little bit, maybe increase them. So instead of 20, 10, 20, and 30%, maybe we look at 20, 25, 35, and 45%. Now I realize, there's a monetary and economic consideration related to that, but someone needs to take a look at this because this problem seems to be getting worse, not better.
I would just, Vicky, you may want to chime in. I would tell you, thank you so much, Mr. Thomas, for your question, is we really are looking at affordable housing as a spectrum, like, and I think I understand, I hope I got it. What you were saying is that we need to be able to be supportive of everyone along the path, along this spectrum. So I think about like homeless individual, right? That comes in, they're going to need shelter very quickly and housing first. And in that sector, so in my mind, it's like 0 to 30%. That is really someone for the continuum of care. That's a group that we work alongside. And then and also Atlanta housing. And then from 30 to 60%, really it's someone who earns about 40,000. That's someone who's earning about up to $18 an hour, maybe $17 an hour. They're going to work on, so 15 to 17, they're going to work on that sector, right? And or those individuals. And then we believe there's some from 80 to 120. And I'm really thinking about your teachers, your first year teachers, your officers, police officers, firefighters, before they start to get overtime, your city workers, your federal workers. These are individuals that perhaps are still making about $54,000, $60,000. They also need a home to live in, and they would love to be in the city. Or the new college student that's getting out from Georgia State with a whole bunch of debt, right? So the idea is meet people where they are, create options, and there really just isn't enough money to go around. We hear HUD is cutting how much funding they're putting out for affordable housing, so that will lower that, making that much more competitive. So to answer your question, it's about spectrum, meeting people where they are, offering different type of AMI access so that you can meet people where they are and how they want to live. Some people want to have a roommate, some people prefer to rent, some people prefer to buy, or maybe their credit, they need to sit out a little bit, so maybe a lease to own. And so we've started to explore not only the spectrum, but the type of units we'll produce. And that's what it's exciting, that yes, we're doing some single family, we're doing some with permanent affordability, right? Because we think of examples like San Francisco, they used to have a lot of affordability, but their affordability ended 60 years, right? They had 60-year terms, and you think, oh, 60 years is a long time. Well, it went by really quick, and now they turn around, they don't have affordability, or they're struggling. I will say they're struggling. So we've been thinking of models like permanent affordability. So you see us teaming up with the Atlanta land trust. So what it does is we're only selling the improvements, not the land, so that we could keep it in permanent affordable. So in our mind, it's about meeting people where they are within the spectrum, and then creating different assets and tools to meet them. If you want to rent, we've even gone so far as to do some of the smaller homes and the shared leasing. That there's some folks that want sort of like this shared home where they're renting out a room and they're sharing a kitchen. Again, the idea, it's not an end all be all, but I do think it's us really trying to think of difference in ANI spectrum, different types of units, and the goal at the end of the day is meet people where they are so that we can do a little bit of everything. So I hope that addressed your question. Or Vicky, I don't know if I missed anything, or you have any additional thoughts you wanted to add on to respond to that question. No.
I think that, I'm sorry, I was trying to come off of mute. So I think the question kind of way is, why do we ask developers for higher percentage of affordable units?
Yes.
Did I just miss the whole question? Sorry, Mr. Thomas.
Vicky, that's my point. In other words, what we're basically doing right now is saying, if you build me a development, and we'll subsidize you if 15%, 10% or 20% or 30% of the folks are at a certain lower income level. And what I'm saying is that number is too low. That number needs to be increased. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have this problem. In other words,
what number is too low? I think I'm confused.
The
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 AMI
10%.
levels that we evaluate, is that what
Well,
you're
not
referring
necessarily.
to? Okay.
In other words, if the developer is going to build, right, and we
Mhm.
subsidize that developer for 10% of the folks moving in, maybe that development should be 20%. In other words,
Okay. So most, and just to be honest with you, most of our developments come in at the 40%, at 60% AMIs. I mean, we really get a lot of affordable units in there. The ones that, so I'm gonna say it like this. So for our incentives, yes, we have to have kind of that requirement that we do have for whatever it is that we're doing. But why we put it like this, if we don't, and they want our incentive, then the thing is that we will not get any affordable units, right? So at least we're putting something there to get it. And that was the cause for the inclusionary zoning. We were not getting really, affordable units. There was a lot of market rate units or developers coming in and buying land that wasn't focused on affordable housing, which prompted them to create the inclusionary zoning, because otherwise the market developer would come in and you'd have no affordability and all the costs around the bedline would be really high and no one would be able to live there and people would be pushed out. This way, you implement that affordability requirement. Yes, it may be small, but at that same time, you're getting something where you normally would not have even gotten anything.
And so, and I'm sorry, Mr. Thomas, I totally missed your question, but so I was so excited.
But that's okay.
But in either case, Vicky is right. It's an incentive, right? So if there is not an upside to the developer is not going to do it. So we've created upsides to the developer, but even with the upside, I'll tell you, Midtown, we've been trying to get developers, all of those, I don't want to say all, but maybe 90% of everything that's gone up, zero affordability, zero. And we've been approaching them like, hey, here's our tools. They're like, nah, it's not worth it. We don't want it. We're like, we need to be in Midtown. Why do we need to be in Midtown? Because if we have affordable housing units, then you have people close to where they work and they don't have to pay high transportation costs. We don't have to worry about getting people. The whole point is get people close to transportation, job centers. Or think of Bucket, like it's too expensive. They're like, no, we don't want the tool. We're like, so it really is, we want to incentivize, so there's an upside, but we want to ensure that we're getting a good deal for it at the same time. Because at the end, they won't take it. Look at all what happened in some of those in Midtown. And Midtown's been trying to get very creative, and they're still deciding to build with zero affordability in 90% of the projects.
And Vicky, I don't know if you mentioned this in your presentation, but another way that we've also approached that is by providing deeper subsidies per unit for developers who are willing to get into those deeper levels of affordability. And I think it's also important to mention that we have had some really great stewards, people who have come to our program and are really on of their own volition, going after those really deeply affordable units at that 30% of AMI levels. But to the point that Dr. Clementes has made and that Vicky has made, it really does take layering and a diverse number of tools that, we only have the capacity to provide so much, but we definitely in our roles have set some standards around how we want to encourage developers to reach those deeper levels of affordability.
Yeah. And if I could just, I know we're kind of saying the same thing and a couple other people have questions, but just kind of reiterate too, that we do hear and have heard from small developers also, talking about affordability and deeper levels. So it allows them the opportunity to do some smaller developments and, with those and smaller developments, actually, we say, 30% of the units with some of our smaller incentives like the HOB, the Housing Opportunity Bond Fund financing, that those can be at the 80% AMIs and lower. So, we try to hear everyone and try to be all to all, but some of them, some of the programs and guidelines that we have, we're really restricted by the federal government. And so we have to adhere to those guidelines. Only the incentives that we come that are locally can we kind of basically control what that amount is. So I hope we got you that time.
Sorry again for missing that.
I just want to reiterate a point too that was made earlier today in one of our committee meetings by one of our developers, is that, you know, currently, you know, they are spending roughly $175,000 per unit for a unit that may only be about 500 square feet. So that's really just to underscore that there's a balance that has to be struck in terms of, you know, what the cost point is going to be for that developer to provide and produce those deeper levels of affordability. Because in order to sustain the project, they have to be able to create and generate, you know, cash flow that'll allow them to repay their debts to their lenders, to those financiers in those deals. So there is a delicate balance, and it's really going to require the involvement and investment of not just public dollars, but a lot of philanthropic and private dollars to make some of those deeper levels of affordability available and sustainable.
Thank you guys so much. This was good, good discussion on that topic. I was trying to get a perfect segue from Vicky's comment to the next question.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. These are all, it's really good discussion. Does Invest Atlanta have direct contact with HUD, anyone who is influential and might be able to help shift some of the parameters that Mr. Thomas mentioned? That question is coming from Janet Bobbitt.
That the AMI levels? I'm going to ask Mr. Thomas. I don't want to get it wrong this time.
I'm going to guess yes, because she referenced HUD in her.
Okay. No.
No.
HUD is pretty, they're pretty, you know, we've approached them, but they're saying, no, these are the AMI and these are the AMI based on their analysis. And I think they do it standard for the entire nation, but we will continue to ask, that's for sure.
And I'm sorry, there was a follow-up to that question from Ms. Bobbitt also asking if you have direct contact with state members who allocate, I think state legislators is what she meant, who allocate funds, since in Georgia, we have both federal and state incentives.
Those are the federal and state tax credits she's referring to. So those are associated with the HUD, right? So those are associated with the HUD, with the tax exempt bonds allocation. That's how you get those tax credits. And so, you know, the income levels that we do, those are pretty standard and have been at the 40% at 60% or the 20% at 50%. But when they're getting tax credits, you're gonna, most of the time, the development is gonna be anywhere from 70 to 80% affordable, right? And restricted. We just look at that baseline because tax credits give them, the more tax credits they get, the more affordable units they're gonna have. So, and I think that's the direction we're going in. Are we asking for enough affordable units? Is that really kind of where I'm at? If that's it, then the more the tax credits you have, the more tax credits you have, the more affordable units you'll have. We just say there's a baseline, you gotta have at least 40% at 60% or 20% at those 50%. That's the minimum you got to have, but they can go above that. We just don't like to see 100% because we don't want it to get back into the area or space. We want people of all income levels to be able to live in sites.
Mixed income housing. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. All right. So we have time for these last two questions, and then Samantha's going to take us to wrap up. Carla and then Daniel.
Okay, this is a quick one. You've answered pretty much the question I had initially. It was the one that was brought up by Mr. Thomas. And you answered it. But the other part of it dealt with affordable housing. For the district that I represent, I've got 4 new developments online, lots of beds, and not one of them is affordable housing. They're all market rate. So when you're saying about inclusionary, I understand it is kind of difficult to kind of woo them. I've got about 4 more developments that should be probably around the 300 or so bed mark. that maybe if everything gets online starting by the end of the year, and at this point, I still have 0 affordable beds. So what some of the communities are doing, at least that what we're trying to do, is to put together our plans to be able to partner with the city and with the program like Invest Atlanta to work with some of the developers that they will start providing it, or at least find some kind of sweet spot with this these incentive programs, because I'm getting none. I'm getting none.
If I may ask, what area are you in?
I'm in East Atlanta.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's another challenging market.
Yes, it is.
We have some developments over there, but yes, we know it's definitely increasing over there, and it is very challenging to do in that area. It's, you know, the conversations are hard conversations. So hopefully you can continue those conversations, and Ms. Kazi, and then reach out to us and definitely be there to assist any way that we can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carla, and thank you, Vicky. Daniel?
So, Dr. Eloisa, you mentioned land trust where there's some land that developers can build on, but you keep the land. That was really intriguing. I have some other comments that I'll go quickly, some last, but could you give more information on that?
Yeah, so we're very excited with the model. It's the first time we've been able to see something like this in fruition. So the thought is the land will continue to be owned by the community land trust. And what they sell is the improvement. So let's say it's a vacant piece parcel of land, developer comes in, builds the house. Well, then what we do is we ensure that this gets sold to an affordable housing individual. Now, 2 things about it. Again, remember the conversation about the spectrum, it's a stepping stone, right? Because we do recognize that you're only gonna get the uptake on the value of the home. The land will always stay with the land trust. So they come in understanding that restriction. When they sell, then they must sell it to another affordable housing individual. And at the future time, they'll go by the AMI that's scheduled by HUD. And so what that does is ensure that that property will stay in perpetuity for someone in an affordable unit. And the thought is maybe you go from renting to now owning the improvement because you're not paying for the land, so your loan and how much you need to come to the table is less. Then you sell that property, make money on the increase of the improvement, and then go buy a home or a property and with the property and the home. So it's a stepping stone. It really helps to get individuals into a permanent home. A home and the land.
Yeah. So as a developer, how would you market that? Like, I would lease the land.
Yeah, it's like a lease,
and then sell the house.
Correct.
Where are these? Is there like an availability list of what's available to do this, or you just?
Yeah. I would go to the Atlanta Land Trust website. I'll send it to Leah, and they have a map of all those that they're working on currently right now. We have several projects that we're working with them on.
Okay, cool. It's last question, I think.
Daniel, you ran questions.
Did I overrun? Am I out?
You ran out of questions a long time ago.
All right. I'll get on the next one and I'll ask.
No, go ahead. And I've got one other question that I was going to try to squeeze in.
Go ahead. Mine's not important. Go ahead, do theirs.
I was just going to say, Daniel, if you have additional questions, you have our contact information.
Just
reach out to
thanks.
us.
All right, cool. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I'll put the link for the website to Leah so that she can drop it on for you.
Cool. Take the other question.
Eloise, I already put it in the chat.
Oh, you're the best. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, this is the last question of the evening, and I am really encouraged and inspired by this spirited conversation that we've had tonight. The last question, do we have any funding opportunities for shared or micro housing development? That question came from Frank Morales.
Say it again, Leah.
So,
I'm sorry.
Shared or micro housing development. So we have just brought before, or will be bringing before our board this month, a very interesting project. I think that speaks to that type of model that you're looking at. There's a developer in the Grove Park community, Grove Park Renewal, that has received land that they're looking to develop. They have about 10 lots that they'll be developing about 40 homes on. And you ask, how do you get 40 homes on 40 units on 10 different lots? Well, you do that by providing some variations in the style of housing and the type of housing that you have. So this is an interesting model that will take one structure and divide it into three units that will include an accessible dwelling unit, a guest home unit, and then a primary house. So I think that's probably the closest thing that we have actually come to fund that looks like some of that micro unit that you may be speaking to. I wish I had the opportunity to show you exactly what their design looks like, but what they're using and what they're capitalizing on is the city's R4 or R5 zoning requirement, or residential zoning requirement, that will allow them to have a higher level of density in neighborhoods that were typically considered can typically have single family residences in them. And this is possible because many of those lots that they've been able to retain are large size lots that have deep back from the right of way of the street, from the front setback of the street, that will give them the opportunity to build those units in the way that they've designed them. So we have some developers that have come to us with some interesting projects similar to that. I don't know if Vicki, you have any other examples of developers that have provided some of those micro unit style housing options. But I think this is probably one of the first projects that we've had the opportunity to review as well, that's incorporating some of those accessory dwelling unit options for housing. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Samira. And whoo, thank you, Invest Atlanta. That was another, I think our third this year, really great class, third of 4. We have one other class with Invest Atlanta this year and a ton of other classes coming up this month, next month, and up until I believe November. Samantha's gonna share those classes in just a moment. And while she's pulling that up, I will thank all of you for being here. Thank you, Dr. Clementich. Thank you, Michelle, so much for coordinating this. Vicki, Samira, and Stephen, my colleagues and friends at Invest Atlanta. It is always so good to see your faces, and I'm just excited to present all of this good information to the community, to the public. As you can see, people are really interested in getting this info. So thank you all again so much. And of course, to all of you that are here for the class, thank you for taking time from your evening to be here and learn more about these programs that are available to Atlantans. Sam?
Okay, so thank you everyone for sticking around. It was a lot of good information, as Leah reiterated. I would like to let you all know about our upcoming courses, and the next 2 courses are actually in person. I would like you all to keep in mind that we are practicing CDC guidelines as far as social distancing. So our first course coming up, the next course is actually for seniors. It's our CP 1003 Civic Participation for Seniors. It's Tuesday, July 26, 2022, 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. at Atlanta City Hall Atrium, and it's only 50 slots. So if you know a senior that is active or wants to be more active, it's civically engaged, please send them our link. The next course following that is our CP 1006 Atlanta Community Engagement Playbook. That's on a Saturday, July 30th, 2022, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the YMCA of Metro Atlanta. That's actually the newest YMCA that is on MLK Junior Drive, right near Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We only have 25 slots for that class. And of course, following that is our CL 1005 Bylaws Clinic. This course is on Thursday, August 11, 2022, from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. virtually online at Zoom. And to register for more information, please visit www.npuatlanta.org. To follow us and just keep up with anything that is NPU, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at NPU Atlanta. You can also find us on Nextdoor at City of Atlanta Neighborhood Planning Units. Following this meeting, immediately you all will receive an email with an evaluation. We ask that you please complete it. That's, of course, we want to keep NPU University informative and relevant. So for that, we need your feedback. You will receive this email as well as the link to the video. Fill it out. Thank you so much. And I will see you all for the next class.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to second Samantha's motion to beg you to please complete the surveys. For those of you that have been around City Hall for a bit, you know that we have to justify our budget. About half of my budget goes to NPU University. And in order to keep this program alive and keep providing these classes for you, we need to be able to justify it. We need to be able to say that people appreciate the program, are learning from it, are attending the classes, etc. So please do complete the survey that Samantha sends to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Feel free to reach out to us if you've got questions or need more information. You can find this class and all of our other classes on our YouTube channel and on Facebook at NPU Atlanta. Take care, everybody. Good night. Kisses to my neighbors. Hi, Miss Ola, and I saw Miss Vanessa somewhere too. Good to see you, Miss Vanessa. And Miss Matt was here from my NPU as well. Good to see all of my people. Good night, everyone. Sam, if you didn't let me do it at the beginning, I was going to do it at the end on my shout outs.